Welcome to Michigan's World War I Centennial News Report for December 2018, Wartime Recipes 2018. I'm your host, Dennis Skupinski. Save meat, flour, sugar, and fats. That was the theme during the First World War. We're going to look at wartime recipes that do that. They also wanted to instill in the housewife at home that food was a weapon, so don't waste it. This state report, Michigan's World War I Centennial Commission met for the final time on Friday, December 7th at 10 a.m. at the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs in Lansing. The main topic of discussion was a summary final report for the Michigan World War I Centennial Commission, which will be submitted to the governor to be archived in the state archives. This report is a summary of all the events and happenings during Michigan's World War I Centennial. Besides having archives in the state, Michigan's World War I Centennial webpage will be archived in the Library of Congress. It will be copied at a future date. To learn more about Michigan's World War I Centennial or find out about events going on around the state, go to www.cc.org/Michigan for the latest information on Michigan's World War I Centennial. 1 century ago, December 1918. On December 1st, 1918, British and American troops began the occupation of Germany by crossing the Rhine River. On December 8th, 1918, the United States Third Army began its occupation duty in the city of Koblenz, Germany. Its main mission was to accept German war material for processing as terms of the treaty specified. Also, they will receive financial retribution from the German people. The area was 2,500 square miles, and the U.S. Third Army, which became the Army of Occupation, had over 250,000 soldiers in it. The Army was commanded by General Dickman, and it was just recently organized on December 14, 1918. Its sole purpose was to become the Army of Occupation in Germany. During the month of December 1918, the American North Russian Expeditionary Force, made up of about 5,000 Michiganders, were located in Archangel, Russia, were still fighting for their lives against the Bolsheviks. On December 26, 1918, after spending Christmas with the American troops in France, President Wilson goes to London for preliminary talks about the forthcoming peace conference. On December 27, 1918, the Great Polish Uprising begins. The Polish military uprises against the German military occupation. The Poles managed to defeat the Germans, and resulting in a free, independent Poland that was formed at the Treaty of Versailles a couple months later. Wartime recipes. Meat pies with a rice crust. This is less work than a pastry crust, and it saves wheat. To make the meat pie recipe with a rice crust, these are the ingredients. You'll need 4 cups of rice, 1 onion, 2 cups of tomatoes, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/8 teaspoon of pepper, 1 tablespoon of fat, 1 pound of raw meat or leftover meat cut up into small pieces. The first thing we do with the recipe is melt the fat. Normally you would use butter, but since this is a wartime recipe, we're using a relatively new product during World War I called Crisco. Crisco was designed to save butter, so that's what we're using today. Add the sliced onion, and if using raw meat like we are today, we are using ground pork. Cook it until the red color disappears. Once the meat and the onion are browned, then you want to start adding the seasoning and the tomato, and you want to heat thoroughly. While you're finishing heating the meat, tomato, and onion, you want to grease a pan and get it ready for your pie. The next step is we're adding the bottom of the pie crust. We're using about 2 to 2 1/4 cups of rice to make the bottom of the pie. You're going to spread this around 1/4 inch around your pie dish. Then you're going to add your meat, tomatoes, and onion mixture and pour it into the pie dish. It should be about 1/4 inch pie crust with your meat filling on top, and this is what it should look like from the side. Once you have your meat and tomato gravy into the pie dish, you want to spread it around evenly. Once it's spread around evenly, then you want to take the remainder of your rice and pour it on top and spread this around to make a top of the pie crust. Make sure you cover everything. Once you have your rice crust spread evenly over your pie, you want to put it into an oven to be able to cook it at about 350 degrees for 30 minutes. After baking about a half hour at 350 degrees, your wartime recipe meat pie should be done. Pull it out of the oven and let it cool for about 10 to 15 minutes before serving. This wartime recipe saves wheat using rice instead of flour, and also we use Crisco instead of butter. Now, instead of reading about history, you can actually taste it with wartime recipes. Our second wartime recipe is called potatoes creamed with peppers and cheese. The first thing you'll need is 1 cup of cream, and I'll show you how to make this cream if you don't have it in your refrigerator. Next, we'll need a tablespoon of flour, a teaspoon of salt, 1 1/2 cups of grated cheese, about 3 pounds of boiled potatoes, 1 cup of milk, 1 tablespoon of fat, 3 egg yolks, some grains of red pepper, and a few peppers. Wartime recipes making cream. Cream is nothing more than a high fat content milk. The way you make it is mix 2/3 cup of milk with 1/3 cup of butter. After the butter is melted, pour it into the milk, and this gives you the high fat content needed for milk, which is called cream. Now you can use this in your recipe. Potatoes creamed with pepper and cheese. Now that you've made the cream, we can get back to our wartime recipe, potatoes creamed with peppers and cheese. The first thing you want to do is mix your flour and butter together. Once that's done, you want to add your milk and then the cream that you just recently made. After the ingredients are thoroughly mixed, then you're going to pour the items into a saucepan, and on low heat begin to heat it. Then you're going to add your grated cheese until it is melted. Once the grated cheese is melted in the sauce, then you can add your beaten egg yolks. Then your sauce is complete. Next thing to do is chop up your cold boiled potatoes and also your green peppers and put these into a baking pan. Then you can pour your sauce into the pan and put it into the oven for 350 degrees and cook it for about 30 minutes. After 30 minutes at 350 degrees in your baking dish, your creamed potatoes with peppers and cheese should be thoroughly cooked and browning on top. Let cool for about 10 minutes before serving. This wartime recipe substituted creamed potatoes with peppers and cheese for a meat dish. This main dish, creamed potatoes with peppers and cheese, would have been served on Meatless Mondays. Wartime recipes of the Liberty Biscuit. What you're going to need is 16 ounces of corn flour, 16 ounces of wheat flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 heaping tablespoon of shortening, such as Crisco, and about a cup of milk to make the dough soft. Then we're going to bake it in a 400-degree oven for about 15 minutes. So we take our 2 flours, mix that with the salt, baking powder, and shortening. Then we're going to be adding milk, about a cup, to make it a soft dough. When that is done, we're going to be greasing our biscuit pan and get ready to pour the biscuit mix into the molds. We're going to pour it into about 1/2 to 3/4 of the biscuit mold. Then we're going to place it in a hot oven, which is 400 degrees, for 15 minutes. So we put the Liberty biscuit mix in the oven for 400 degrees for 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, we get a light brown Liberty biscuit. Wartime recipe Liberty biscuit was designed to save flour, and the way we did that was by only using 16 ounces of wheat flour and using 16 ounces of corn flour or cornstarch. We also saved on fats by using Crisco instead of butter. Wartime recipes Salvation Army Doughnuts. We're going to be making about a dozen donuts. This recipe is supposed to make 2 dozen, but I guess I made the donuts too big. This is what you're going to need. 2.5 cups of flour, 1 cup of sugar, 2.5 tablespoons of baking powder, 1/8 teaspoon of salt, 1 egg, 3/4 cup of milk, and 8 ounces of lard. Combine all the ingredients in a bowl and mix. Thoroughly knead the dough, roll smooth, and cut into rings that are less than 1/4 inch thick. During the World War, the Salvation Army Donut Girls used whatever they could find, from baking powder cans to coffee percolator tubes. The next thing to do is drop the rings into the boiling lard. Make sure that the fat is hot enough to brown the donuts gradually. Turn the donuts slowly several times. Usually it takes about 2 minutes. When browned, remove the donuts and allow the excess fat to drop off. Then, if you'd like, you can dust them with powdered sugar, refined sugar, or sugar in a cinnamon mix. Let cool and enjoy.
They were summoned from the hillside, they were called in from the glen, and the country found them ready at the stirring call for men. Let no tears add to their hardships as the soldiers pass along, and although your heart is breaking, make it sing this cheery song. Keep the home fires burning while your hearts are young.